Today's video is going to be about mitre gauges, mitre saws, pros and cons, what makes them stand out between each other, and I've got the best mitre gauge on the market to show you. Hey up, mother lovers. I was gifted a mitre fence recently that this video is going to be about. Well, that and more. It took me down quite a rabbit hole. You see, I've never really seen the point of these mitre gauge setups because they're very expensive, a decent proper one. More so because I've got a mitre saw, which is safer and more accurate. In this rabbit hole, I came across a bit of a bell end which got my back up. On my journey of learning how to make furniture, I spent a hell of a lot of time on YouTube trying to learn. I wasn't taught any of this at school or college or trained or anything. No apprenticeship. A hell of a lot of my hours and wood and time was wasted listening to 90% of the people on YouTube. What it did, the only thing, ironically, what it really did teach me, because of all the mistakes, was how to fix the mistakes. If you're a person that can work out how things work, you're going to easily figure out how to fix and solve problems. Because mostly woodworking really is about solving problems. So anyway, all these people that run their mouth off on YouTube without thinking about what they're saying, gets my back up. And I came across this one guy whilst having a look at researching on YouTube all about mitre gauges and mitre fences, and I'll have to read it to you. And it goes like this: for those that DIY, mitre saw users that have no intention of moving further with woodworking, that's someone who can utilise a mitre saw. If you're the kind of person who wants to eventually get into furniture making, I'd say hold off on getting a mitre saw. What a stupid thing to say. Now this Burke, for the whole video, is basically bigging up table saws, just like this, except his would hold an 8x4 sheet of sheet goods. Going on about table saw sleds and rabbiting on about how cumbersome and how much space a mitre saw takes up. You can see where I'm going with that. Why is there such a hard-on for mitre gauges on a table saw? I've used this one maybe a dozen times. I'm very happy with the gauge itself. The fence, no. At the time when I ordered the fence, I wasn't really thinking too much about it. I just wanted something that was going to save me actually using a table saw sled. Because believe me, table saw sleds are a pain in the arse. They're made out of ply, which I don't care what ply you're talking about. Birch ply will still move through seasonal movement. That in itself is an issue. So if you've got wooden runners in these slots, they're going to expand and contract, so you can pick it up one season, sled will shoot down the mitre slots, and you pick up another season and it ain't going to move. Not to mention that the sleds can warp and twist through seasonal movement. You're literally going to be having to make a table saw sled every season or once a year, and then the following year you're going to probably need to adapt it or make another one. And who wants to make table saw sled for every predicament you need a sled for? Because you're going to need one for all sorts of different. You're going to need one for 45, you're going to need just a straight cut, you're going to need one for trench cutting. So yeah, back to the mitre gauge. I got this mitre gauge because I thought it would solve all that, and it's small and it could just be tucked away. Yeah, I didn't think about a stop block on the fence. I didn't consider any measuring device on the top, and certainly didn't think about any micro adjusting. One thing I noticed first straight away when I started using this, how difficult it was to line up your stock to that blade. This gauge is pretty damn epic though. It's in 1mm increments, which I think is important. It's, might not use it very often, but it's like condoms, isn't it? Better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them. It's well built. It's built like a brick house. I'll get into the stats of it in a bit. If I had endless amounts of money, I would still be buying this one. So let's get on with what I was gifted. This has been killing me waiting so long to open this. So I hope I can get it in one take without any traffic going past. Spares, I'm guessing, and something else. Jesus, it's heavy. Wow. Good God. It's got to be 5 kilos, feels like. I'll weigh it. Heavy's good. Heavy's reliable. If it doesn't work, you can always hit him with it. Oh, hello. Is that going to fall out? No. Oh, look at that. That definitely raises more than an eyebrow. This is definitely a HONGDUI, that's for sure. White on black, easier to read too. I wonder how long it's going to last like looking like this. I'll show you what came my saw originally. Must have been how Lana Rhodes' child must have felt. Way back when I was looking into mitre gauges, it was a 3-horse race. The Incra, the Harvey and the Jessam was 360 something quid, 463 US dollars. The Incra 380 pounds, 488 US dollars. The Harvey 300 quid, $385. But I didn't have any money then, and I don't now either, so that wasn't going to happen. I mean, for that sort of money, you're talking about a power dedicated crosscut mitre saw, really, aren't you? So I thought, that's what a fucking rip-off. And also at the time, the Jessam didn't have a micro adjuster, and I think you can add it to your existing mitre gauge and fence. Don't quote me on that though. I looked at the Incra 2 and I thought that what a lot of unnecessary faff when it came to adjusting 1 degree. The whole mechanism just looked like, oh no, sod that. And recently looked at it, and it hasn't changed in 10 years, 15 years, possibly even 20 years. I'm not sure how long ago it was now. And I don't like the gold either. It's so tacky, I feel. Cue the butt hurt. If it gets your work done and you're happy with it, keep on trucking. I'm happy for you. Good on you. I don't like it. My first choice back then, no, above the 2 I mentioned, was the Harvey for 2 small reasons. One, it can go either side of the saw blade, and the other, doesn't matter what the tilt of the saw is. On the Harvey, it has 2 45-degree angles cut off the fence, so it doesn't. If your blade tilts that way, you're gonna miss the fence, which I thought was very ingenious. The mitre gauge itself back then, I remember being very disappointed, and I can't remember why. It might have been that it didn't have 1 degree increments. I can't remember. But still, it was north of 300 quid, so yeah, I gave up on the idea, and then I got into this whole affiliate marketing stuff, and tools were then being given to me to review. Really should give you guys the lowdown on this mitre gauge, save you a whole video, and why I feel it's the elephant's dangle. First, it is solid as, just look at this thickness on this. 0 to 70 degrees. Does actually go further. I'd say about 5 degrees. As you can hear, it's got positive stops for all the usual suspects. I do love this, but dust does get behind it. Has a nice machine knob, ladies. Ribbed. There's loads of adjustment to dial this in to your fence that way, this way. The mitre bar itself is adjustable from the top. This fence on my saw, the Watkins saw though, I had to add a little block to this to stop it from tipping down. The mitre gauge bar is 19mm, 3/4 inch, pretty much standard size. It will fit the DeWalt sight saws. It doesn't fit the Bosch GTS J10 or the GTS 10C, but I did stumble across in my rabbit hole of this video that of a way of getting this to work on the Bosch saws to fit their stupid. What Bosch thinking of making a slot 16.5mm wide? Nothing fits it except for their crap mitre gauges. As I said, this is 19mm, and that will fit pretty much most cabinet saws. Why is this called a mitre slot? It does loads of stuff. I wouldn't recommend using these on a table saw though, because there are occasions where you need to pull, you're in a spot of bother on the saw and you need to pull that board back to get you out of trouble, and you need to put it back carefully. I mean, you will find a point you need to pull that piece of wood back, and there's no way, if you've got this butted up against your workpiece and the fence, you're not going to be able to pull it back. What the hell are you going to do, because you've only got one pair of arms? And if you're like me and you don't have an emergency stop button to kick knee or belt with something, you're really stuck. So I wouldn't suggest using these. I'd like to give a warm welcome to my new patrons, Matthew Cole and Mark Garrard.
Thank you.
The reason I have this mitre gauge is because of affiliate marketing. So back then I tried a few of them out. The results are in a previous video, the link's below. It's probably one of the most cringiest videos I've ever done looking back. Anyway, long story short, I settled with this beast. Let's get this bad boy installed. Oh, don't be a dick. Nice. Like that. Let's see how square it is this way. No way. I can't complain about that off the bat. Off, no way. Right. It can't be, surely. It's just a whisker, possibly. Bloody hell. I'll quickly run through how you set this up, dial this in. It's really easy. Loosen those two knobs up. Move that fence as close to those teeth as you've got the balls for. A few mil there. Loosen that off. Slide that up to your teeth. And that's where this red knob comes in. Turn that, dial it to 0. That's it. Problem I've got, I was really hoping that this would sit far enough away from that. It's really, I think, sort of 5 mil really is maximum. Just this. As you can see, I'm hitting my dust cover, dust chute, dust strad, whatever you want to call it. It was the same with the other fence anyway, but I think that's one of the reasons it was used a lot less. I'll have to find another one which is as rare as rocking horse, which is taller. I've actually cut this down to make it fit this. It's from a Bosch saw. I'll raise it up. It needs to be done anyway, because as it stands, I'm reducing my cut capacity. If I make that higher, I've got my full cut capacity. Once upon a time when I was setting up this saw, this blade to this mitre slot, I used a gauge. And it was a hell of a job to do. You've got to get your arm through this throat plate to each bolt in the corner and not on the outside of the saw. It was a nightmare, it took forever. But I did see in the comments of other mitre gauge reviews that people said that it's not the best way to, get things square on a table saw. I kind of agree. I think you've definitely got to have a brand spanking new blade in it, because you can find that your blade can eventually have a bit of a wobble to it because you've had a kickback or something. However, I saw in the comments people saying that the best way to set it up is to set it to the bar of the gauge. I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. They say it's faster, it's more accurate. Well, I'd love to know. So anybody in the comments that care to break it down in English to me and to everyone else, that would be wonderful. One other thing I've noticed, which is fine for me, if you're going to go this side, I already see the problem, can't you? The first thing I noticed is that this can't be put on that side of the fence. Not a big deal for me because I only ever cut this side of the fence. But for anyone who wants to put this in that mitre slot, this isn't going to work. But that's f***ing huge. It's like 900 mil. What's that? Okay. Okay, well that's well handy. That moves with this. So we've got to stop. I'm glad that moves right out of the way too. The one I had on a different fence, I think came up to something like that. So it's in the way. But that means... Sorry, this is 910. I stand corrected. That makes that pretty damn solid, doesn't it? That's a really good idea, that. Like that. Yeah. One of the things that really annoyed me about one of those fences I reviewed before was their stop block. I mean, it's not much giving that anyway, but the one I had definitely deflected a bit more than that. But then, I mean, that's just brilliant. Really is brilliant. That's solid. Bet I could take, you know, a 4-inch square leg against that without any trouble. It's not knocking it out. What is that? What is that? I'm not sold on that. It moves it away from your fence by a country mile. Yeah, and the pin's 20mm. What about in the other position? So 45-degree cut, and it's still not touching that. Well, my mitre's not going behind it, and I've got my length. So okay, that's an L from me on that one. Maybe someone else can point out to me what it's about. It's magnetic. As this is having to be put on with a tool, I can never see this being used. I definitely see it being lost. Well, it sits nice and flush. That, my pedigree chums, is for using with a backing board. What size, I hear you holler? Well, that's looking like 10mm. Yeah, no, that. Lose those screws, screw them into that block. Of course, you don't want that there. You can pop it right out of the way down there. You don't want to put it up there, do you? Because you want to move that over, and that just locks that off. So that is out of the way. You can forget about it. Lovely, lovely jubbly. Do you know what else struck me? It's all knobs. Look, knob, 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 knob. Apart from those, which you can set them and forget about them. You don't need any tools to mess around with this, apart from setting up those, I'll imagine. That's brilliant. Let's see how much this micro adjusts by. Well, to be honest with you, if you need to micro adjust even that much, you've got problems. So it's nearly 3.5mm you can micro adjust that by. Having said that, it's a bit loose, so it would come in there. Let's say I want 290. Now this is nice and locked off. You can really get that lined up perfectly. But also, my feeling of this is, so you've made your cut. You're cutting your legs for a table. Okay? You made your cut and you compare it to your last piece, and it's 1/2mm too long. You don't have to eyeball it there. I mean, you can do it here. That's mad. So that's 0.1 of a mil, 0.2 of a mil, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. That's probably a level of accuracy you're not going to need for furniture making. I mean, I'm really pleased with that. Just cuts a nib off. Love that. Something I noticed with mine immediately, I thought this was out. See, it's like 1/2mm out. I tried taking out the screw and resetting it, but you don't need to. It's a bit stiff. You can zero it out. So that, if yours is like that, don't think it's broken and phone China. And going back to that Harvey though, does it not remind you of Bridge City Tools? Certainly the colours and the design of it reminds me of Bridge City Tools. I know Harvey is made in China, and I'm pretty sure Bridge City Tools moved to China too, or has been made in China. Not 100%, but anyway. The HONGDUI fence though is really a nice bit of kit to splash out on. Splash out on. Take that as you will. Let's talk turkey though. The fence alone is £120, which is $154. The fence is shipped within the UK. Mine arrived the next day. The mitre gauge, however, is shipped from China, and that costs £109, $140. Purchasing both is £209, $264. Some cases it's half the price of the other three. Just a heads up though, if you don't know this, if you're in the UK, when you purchase something abroad and it's shipped into it, if it costs over £135, that's your point where you start getting hit import duties. And I think this is why China have shipped a container load over to the UK of the fence and kept the gauge there, so you can buy the pair of them at the same time and not be hit with import duties, because then things get really expensive. And of course, you obviously realise if you're in the UK and you're purchasing the other three mitre gauges fences from the States, you're going to have import duties, so it's going to be even more horrendous in price. The price difference, I think, is mental, on my opinion, for a very well built bit of kit. It blows my mind. I mean, HONGDUI are ahead of the brands like Woodpeckers, Inca and Jessam. They sat back, looked at everyone else's and came up with the best ideas and used them on their HONGDUI. They're really starting to gain traction. Dennis the Menace has been singing their praises on his YouTube channel. Cat's Moses, I think, is in partnership with them. He designed the router plane that Carl Pope Woodcraft viewed on his YouTube channel. So they're becoming quite a contender, aren't they? If you know me and my China Tools reviews, you know I score things in dumplings. 1 dumpling. See, my dumplings are the best. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being crap, 5 being perfection. I'm going to give this 4 out of 5. And not my own rating for me would be 5 out of 5. Maybe 4.5 out of 5. Just because of that dust shroud issue. But let's say 4 stars anyway. And that 4 stars is taking everything into consideration for everyone. The points I've made. Anyway, it's perfect for me in my current saw. That's what matters to me. I want you to make your own mind up about the whole mitre saw, mitre gauge, table saw situation. My opinion, you need both if you're going to be making furniture. You know, at the end of the day, what's really important is what you need and what works for you and what is going to be applicable to your workflow, not what someone says you should use. I will say this is a mental value for money, though. I mean, let's face it, it's in some stages half the price of the other mitre gauges, and I'd say if we had a scoring chart, the HONGDUI and the Harvey, I would give a joint first place, and then I think the Inca would come 3rd place, in my opinion. I know I've said nothing about medium level mitre gauges, but when it comes to mitre cuts, when it comes to any cut, I don't want to be faffing around, setting something up, checking if it's the right angle all the time. I'd rather spend more money on something that gets the job done perfectly every time, and I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to baby it. And those medium price point mitre gauges, well, I've not heard anything good about any of them. That's why they never made it into the top 3 way back then. Comes down to what you can afford, isn't it? I know I started off with the worst mitre saw a company could make. Every cut I had to reset the bloody thing. I then moved on to a DeWalt mitre saw. I could never get that to cut a perfect 45 degrees, so it was not going to do it for furniture making. It's huge as well. Of course, it's got the bars that go out the back. And I got the K-Pax 120. I know you're thinking, well, that's so bloody expensive. Yeah, but the dust collection is brilliant. It cuts perfect angled cuts. It's quieter. It's worth every penny. And the speed that it saves you, it pays for itself in a pretty good amount of time. Mitre saws are a point and shoot. You're done. Table saw, very different story, and it's inaccurate. A mitre saw is purposely made for cross cuts. Table saws generally for rip cuts. Would this ever take the place of my mitre saw? A mitre saw is really point and shoot, isn't it? You literally just walk up to it, put the blade to your line and zip that bit off. So no way. Just no way. The biggest thing for me, though, is cross-cutting long lengths. It's not very safe on a table saw. And the other thing is, I really hate changing blades. I'm not going to lie, I've probably got 10, 15 rip blades. I've got 1 cross-cut blade for the table saw. Obviously, the mitre saw, the blade in it is always a cross-cut blade and never gets a rip cut blade put in it. You can use a combination blade, of course. I don't particularly like the cut of it. It's not as clean as a dedicated cross-cut blade is. On a table saw, that is. By just having a table saw, you're heavily reliant on just 1 tool. You can rip cut and cross cut on a mitre saw. You've got to change the blade. I feel as well with a table saw, it is more work. You need to make jigs for so many cuts. That's making more work. That's costing more time. That's costing money. But I'm not a furniture maker. What do I know? I've got a mitre saw. I'm just a DIYer. Also breaking down wobbly sawn boards. Sooner take it to that and cross cut it than wobble along on the table saw. And besides, often your stock is heavy and thick. It's not as ideal as using that, I promise you, even with a sled. And then you've got to remember, with a sled, you're taking 20mm, 19mm away from your cut capacity. So if you've got a 10-inch blade in there, you're going to have about 50, your cut capacity is going to be about 50mm. You're probably thinking, well, you can flip your stock and cut the other half. You never get a nice, smooth, flat surface. You get a slight step in it, though. I haven't tried yet with this micro adjuster, which is the dog's, by the way. I'm really happy with this. Anyway, I digress. Whereas with a Mitre Saw, you've got 100mm cut capacity in one cut. No flipping, no rotating your stock. Also with a table saw, you've got more chance of a kickback. Now this is a 3 horsepower saw. You get 5 horsepower, you can get 1.5 horsepower. I think that Mitre Saw is 1 horsepower. Kickback off a Mitre Saw isn't the end of the world. Kickback on a table saw, because it's got more power, is vicious. Also, I hear people say that the cut capacity for cross-cutting on a table saw is better. In my case, it's actually less. My Mitre Saw has about 310mm. Back to here, keeping this miter gauge on the table saw enough so it's not tipping back is less from the point of blade to this fence. And people say, well, use a table saw sled, you can put it further off back. That is true, but you're also putting yourself in jeopardy, because if you don't consider the stock you put on the table saw and the weight of the table saw, and you pull that back just that little bit too far, it tips back towards your head. That blade's also going to push that table saw sled to your face. I'm not exaggerating, because I've done it to myself. It's not fun. Nonetheless, you could say a Mitre Saw is a luxury. I beg to differ. I think it's a must. I've only ever had 2 other brands, though. The one was a DeWalt, and the other one I'm not even going to mention. It was a B&Q special. Absolute rubbish. The DeWalt, all being huge, I could never get it to cut at perfect 45 degrees, and I always had to make my cuts left of the blade. Maybe I was just unlucky with my DeWalt, I don't know. The other thing I didn't like about the DeWalt was the handle. Now, a lot of people moan about that handle too, because it's like that. Now, I find, if you've ever been to the gym and you're pulling down your weights like that, you find your arm doesn't always go down perfectly straight, does it? And I think the reason why Festool designed this handle like that is because it's just like you holding a dovetail saw, isn't it? That's staying in line, isn't it? If you know what I mean? Anyway, so I prefer that handle. My advice would be, if you are seriously thinking about furniture and you know this is something you're going to take to the maximum and you can afford it, get that saw. The Dust Collection is the best out of all of Mitre Saws. It's not perfect. In the 10 plus years I've had it, I've had to recalibrate that twice. And the only reason being is because I've moved to another workshop. It's been banged around in transit. Other than that, nothing happens to it in here. I've walked into that arm once or twice. You do it the second time, you don't do it a third time. The other nice thing about that saw is there's no bars sticking out the back of it. Table saw sleds for me as well, I think they're just a YouTube fad. I really don't understand anybody in a workshop that would spend, in the UK, over £100 on an 8x sheet, 18mm piece of birch ply to make shop jigs out of. If you are a table saw sled fan, I'll leave a link below, but these Mitre gauge, HONGDUI flip, whatever they're called, I'll put a link down to one of those. Use those on underneath your table sleds. They won't bind, and they don't change through seasonal movement like wooden runners do. I've tried using plastic runners on my table saw sleds too, and yeah, somehow they still manage to bind up. I think I'll finish up with this. This is a fantastic bit of kit. I think this is the best on the market out of all of them, and it costs 2/3 the price of all of the others. In some cases, half the price, and it's lovely. As always, if you like the cuts of my jib, don't forget to head over to my Patreon page to support this channel. Think of it like buying me a beer once a month. Pressure free, no obligation, cancel any time, no holds barred, the director's cut. So no goats cutting out the good words, and a WhatsApp group. Till next time, be lucky. Please like and subscribe, share if you're really feeling kinky, and we'll see each other again.